Welcome to Women in B2B Marketing, a show where CMOs, VPs of marketing, and all strong women leaders in B2B discuss their top tactics, strategies, and tips for building high-performing teams, leveraging trends, and ultimately rocking their marketing careers. Made by and for women, insightful for all. I'm your host and 15-year B2B marketer, Jane Serra. Let's dive in. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Women in B2B Marketing. Super pumped to have with us the one, the only Brandi Starr, who, let me read through all of your various titles and things that you do, Brandi. COO at Tegrita, which, by the way, is not Tegrita, though they do love the margarita. Marketer, speaker, entrepreneur, podcaster, advisor, author. She has literally done it all. And I've been chatting with her on LinkedIn for ages. It feels like I already know her, but I'm very excited to dive in today and really chat with you one-to-one. Welcome to the show, Brandi.
Thank you so much for having me. I have been this has been the highlight of my week and we haven't even gotten started yet.
Yeah, ditto. I'm so pumped. You already bring great energy. So I'm excited to chat with you and learn so much from you. So speaking of, first thing, which I feel like the entire episode could be all about, your career path and how you got into B2B marketing all the way into being a COO today at Tegrita.
Yeah, it is interesting. So I'm one of the strange people who knew what they wanted to do in middle school. And so I talk about I've been in marketing since the 8th grade, where I entered a competition. I didn't know it was called marketing then, but we had to do posters for some school event. And it was a contest. And basically, when kids bought their tickets, they got a couple bucks off the price if they marked down which poster moved them to purchase the ticket. And I'm not an artist by any stretch. We had to hand draw them, but I really focused on the messaging that would get them to go to whatever this event was. And I ended up winning. And I was like, yes, I want to do this forever. And I started competing in DECA, Distributive Education Club of America, started doing marketing competitions there, went and did my undergrad in marketing. And my college journey was not traditional. It took me 9 years and 5 schools to get my undergrad degree, life's. And when at the time I was still in school, but ready to move into marketing. And I was working in a call center at a voluntary benefits company. And a role opened up that was a marketing specialist. And I wanted that job. I went and talked to the hiring manager and was trying to convince him. And he was like, that sounds all great, but you don't know any of the Adobe design programs. And a huge part of this role is doing design work. And so I, shame to say it, but got a friend give me a bootleg copy of the Adobe. This was back when you still had
we do.
And I learned InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop in a week and I replicated a bunch of things. I went back to him and I was like, this is what I accomplished in a week. I talked to my manager and got him to agree to hold my role for 90 days in the call center if the guy would give me a shot. And I was like, no risk, 90 days, let me do the job. If you're not happy with it, I'll go back to the call center, no questions asked. If you are happy with it, we can negotiate salary, make it official. They'll rehire for my old role. And he was like, man, you got guts. I'll give it a shot, but I'm going to keep interviewing. He was like, because if this doesn't work, I can't have the time to start this process over. So I was like, give it to me.
You're sales at heart too.
I admit, as much as I hate sales, but I was doing it. And at that time I was doing design work that was being sent via fax machine. And it was one of those things that I had to be effective. And I've been in marketing ever since. And that was 2001.
That's amazing. I love that so much. And the fax machine, I grew up with a fax machine in my mom and dad's bedroom. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Anytime that made a noise or we got a phone call and it was like that.
Yeah, and I don't think my youngest has ever even used a fax machine.
There's all these jokes there. I think Gen Z, whatever the generation is after millennials, is they get a picture of a fax machine and they are asked what it is. And they make all kinds of guesses that are hilarious and not at all what it is. So funny. I also saw you had various different roles in marketing as well, like product and different aspects. So yeah, tell us a little bit about going from one to the other.
So it was always one of those things. One of my biggest weaknesses is when I get bored, I get completely disinterested. I am either all in or not at all. And so I would have situations where I was in a role, I was thriving. There may have been opportunities to move up, but I got bored. And so it was, what's this next thing? And so it very much was like, oh, this was fun, but this company had bad data. And so I then jumped into a role of being like the database manager for a marketing team and managing all their data and figuring out segmentation and targeting and being the person that sliced and diced the data. And then I got bored with that and did some product marketing because it was like, this is a different flavor of marketing. And honestly, my career leaps have really been I'm bored now. What looks fun next? And I didn't realize that I was, on an actual journey. It just was, this is what I did. And when I got into a more strategic role of really being able to orchestrate what the communication journey looks like and how we actually generate revenue, how we stay in front of people, how we convince them to buy and to stay a customer and all those sorts of things, that was where I really found my sweet spot. And that's where it really energizes me to think about how do we do that effectively and how does that evolve? And then in one of my roles, I joined right as the organization was implementing Eloqua, the marketing automation platform.
Yeah.
And I got really heavily into the technology side. And it was a little bit of a riff within the organization because based on my role, I wasn't supposed to do all the technical things. I had my hands in there and people slipped me permissions on the back end. And I got really good at that. I was a real Ella Queen back in the day.
Love it.
And I wanted to do more of that. And there was such a limited use case for marketing automation and marketing technology at that time that I was like, what's the next step that will allow me to do more of that? And so I wanted to get into consulting. And so that was how I joined Tegrita. I joined as a consultant. I was doing Eloqua implementations and a lot of other things. And although at the time I joined the company, we were purely Eloqua technology consultants, because I had such strategy background, when I was helping clients with the technology, I would see horrible strategy. And I'm not one of those people who can just keep my mouth closed. And so I started consulting on the strategy. How do we make this actually work? How do we, that middle of funnel, which then I didn't know to call it that, but really once you have gotten their attention, but before they're ready for sales, how do we orchestrate that journey in a meaningful customer-centric way? And I grew and the organization grew and there became an opportunity to move into leadership. And I was already doing the operations of the business. So it became a natural transition. And then once we started doing marketing, because at one point we were the marketing consultancy that did no marketing, became a natural fit for that to come under me as well.
Ah, perfect. Because we were saying this before we turned the mics on, that the role of COO has evolved so much and it's very different from company to company. So as COO, which teams do you oversee? Marketing
I lead operations and marketing. And we're in a consultancy, like I have a couple friends who also have the title of CEO And those two people are in different industries from me and different industries from each other. All three of our jobs look completely different. And so
Yeah.
it is one of those roles that, depending on what organization you're in, it can mean so many different things. And for me, the big thing is I really own operationalizing the business. Like, what are the systems, the processes? Our CTO leans into the technology, but with the technology, how are we leveraging that? And just making sure both internally and how we run our business, as well as how we work with clients, what that process and approach looks like. And our operationalizing how we work with our clients has actually become one of our biggest competitive advantages, because we have a handful of competitors that their quality of work in general is good. It's on par with ours. We're in the same range in terms of pricing, but consistently we have won customers in multiple competitor takeaway because of the way that we run our accounts and the way that the business is operationalized. And that is because it's just been a thing that I have always been a process person. Like, my friends used to laugh at me at the whole process that was grocery shopping before I switched to Instacart, because there was a spreadsheet with calculation and it had an output for my list, and that was organized based on what aisle things were in and had average prices so that I knew if a sale was a good sale. Like, it was a whole thing.
Wow. That's beautiful.
It just is who I am as a person. Now I just click on Instacart and it shows up at the door. But it is that operational mind of how we create workflows and processes and tools and all of those things, from small, like grocery shopping, to the big, like running a consultancy.
So cool. So you must be type A, right? That's what I'm getting from the listing and the efficiency. I love that. You are basically who I strive to be, but we'll never get to that because I am very type B. Like, do we need anything at the store? Let's walk in. Although now I at least have a keep note with a checklist. So there's something.
And see, I am working on relaxing my type A to lean a bit more into we can go with the flow. It's okay. It's all a process.
Everything's a balance in life.
Yes.
So there's so many avenues to go down from here. One thing that I want to dive into, you've definitely heard this before, being in the email space. I've seen time and time again lately, we all love to say something is dead, right? I have seen many a times lately, email is dead. What are your thoughts on this?
Email is not dead. And I do not foresee in the foreseeable future that email will die. And I think the reason that this comes up over and over is because the role of email evolves. Like, when I can remember getting my first email address, and so few people had email, it was almost like if you would send a letter, then you would also send an email. Then we got marketing automation, and it became this place of, we can send everything. And the role of think became like the tactic. And that approach to email is dead. And that's what I think keeps happening, is a particular playbook dies, not the tactic.
Yes.
And so email very much is still alive and well. I have lots of use cases of how email can be directly tied to driving revenue. I've seen companies with just an email newsletter use it as a key lead driver. And so what happens is the tactic has to change based on how the market and the buyer and the needs change. And so email has a more limited role than it once did, because we have to use it more strategically, because we all get so many emails, but it's not dead and it's not going anywhere. And when it comes to the middle of the funnel and customer communications, it is still the dominant channel for communicating. And I don't know that's going to change anytime soon.
Yes. I love your point that the tactic itself is never dead, but the playbook you're using is dead. You hit the nail right there on the head, because I was just on a podcast talking about webinars. And just like email, I often hear webinars are dead. I just think the term needs a rebrand, like webinar.
Yes.
Maybe email does too. And how we go about doing it and executing is the problem and what needs to change. But they're very much alive.
Yeah. And it is one of those things. It's funny. I just saw a study where someone tested calling webinars different things, and every other term went over better than the term webinar, because webinars have gotten a bad rap, mainly because so many companies used webinars and disguised them as sales pitches. So it was just a pitch that they slapped the name webinar on. And so again, that old playbook is dead. That's not what people are interested in. And I think what happens when things change, everyone starts looking for a new word to call things. It's, instead of a webinar, it's a virtual event. Okay, but if you still run the same playbook and call it a virtual event, it still sucks. Like, it's not about the word.
Yeah.
We can call it bananas if we want to. It doesn't change its effectiveness if you're using an outdated strategy. And so I think we get new tactics as technology evolves, but everything has a life cycle. Like at one point, QR codes were big and then they died off. And then the pandemic has brought them back. And now QR codes are extremely effective. And so it's like, once a channel exists, the channel exists. And unless it completely goes away, direct mail is another one.
Yeah.
It's really effective, stop being effective. Now, if used correctly, effective again.
So true.
It really is just the playbook has to change over time.
Yeah. Brandi, watch the fax machine come back around next.
Ooh, now that's one I can get.
You never know.
But if you think about it, email is the evolution of fax. Like at the time, the technology that we had was to send it that way. And email is just an upgraded version of the fax machine. And it became one-to-one. And fax tried to hold on by doing digital fax, which basically just sent the document via email. And it is just the consistent evolution of things.
Yeah, agreed. Sticking to email for a little bit, what tactics do you see working underneath that? Like, you mentioned an example of a customer or somebody you saw doing just a newsletter, but that was a huge lead driver for them. What other tactics in the world of email do you see working?
Yeah, I would say there is nothing that works across the board, because I have one client that their newsletter is their bread and butter. They could potentially eliminate almost every other communication and still drive as many leads. I have another client who I'm trying to convince to kill off their newsletter, because it's just an extra thing that they're doing and it's not super effective. And so what I would say holistically is working is essentially doing the research to understand what your buyer wants and then running that playbook. There is no secret sauce or a special formula. I hate the term best practice, because generally best practices are generic advice. And it is really like, I believe in running tests, in trying to see what works, what gets traction, what meets the need, understanding what is the need, what are your buyers or your customers need from you, and running that. And email is still a really dominant part of that if you've done it well. But it is always going to be, using another buzzword, multi-channel or omni-channel, which always is like such a big word. But it is all of those things of, how do we get the information that our buyers and customers need in front of them in an effective way. And so the tactic that is universally working is doing the research and testing to see what works in your business, and then doing more of that.
Yeah. Are there any options that you recommend testing, or varieties or versions or ways to deliver this information that's worth A/B testing or ABCDE testing for each customer?
Yeah. So I recommend taking beyond just like, we're going to A/B test subject lines or A/B test the green button versus the blue one. And those are a good start. If you're testing nothing, that's a good place to start. But I like to take a little bit more of a scientific approach and having a hypothesis of something I believe about my buyer and having that be really specific. So we did this recently with a client where my hypothesis was that their small business audience was a bit more ripe for more playful conversational things than their enterprise audience. And so with that small business audience specifically, we ran tests across, I think, 8 different communications over 3 or 4 months. And we looked at the aggregate results. We ran the same sort of messaging that we were giving to enterprise. And then we did a second version that had a more playful conversational tone. And I was right that the small business audience connected so much more to emails with memes in them or some of the more pop culture references, things like that, than the enterprise audience. And because we did it with different types of communications, multiple emails over a period of time, the results could actually be trusted. And so from there, that changed the strategy. And we now know this is a sub audience that we need to talk to differently. And so that is really, and we like to go through these cycles. We do them quarterly where we'll test 2 or 3 things each quarter where we'll have a hypothesis of this is something we believe to be true about this population. And then we'll run tests over multiple types of communications, glean the results, and then share those results out so that people can do more of what's working. That to me is the right way to approach testing, because when you just do a subject line test, it's okay, subject line B works better than A, which is great for that particular email, but how do we apply that to other communications? And we can't A/B test every single email like that. We don't have unlimited resources, so we've got to get more strategic. So doing more of a scientific test gets you there and gets you some impactful outcomes.
Yeah, I love the idea of doing like a quarterly hypothesis that you then test over time. I'm curious, did you also test the reverse at all in this instance, where the playful language for enterprise?
We did later. So we didn't in that initial test.
Yeah.
But after we ran the test on small business, implemented that, and saw such great response rates, the question was raised, does our whole audience like this? And the answer was no.
Interesting.
That the enterprise audience definitely, it resonated more when we were a bit more direct and still conversational, but less playful.
Okay, no memes.
They didn't respond as well to the memes, emojis and subject line, those sorts of things. And that is the thing. And you have to look at what are some of those sub segments. For some people, it could be industry. I've seen that as well, where certain industries I know like with legal and finance, those are industries, if you're selling into them, keep those emails short, to the point, and say nothing else. And it just is one of those, you got to test those hypotheses. And they're not always winners. There's sometimes I felt confident about a hypothesis. We ran the test and it was like, that was wrong.
But
and
now you know.
Valuable too. So we keep what we know is working, and we know not to do that now.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I really want to get back to testing more and more. It's hard with a small team because you're just like the survival mode. But I would love to get back to testing. This stuff is so fun for me. And I would have thought that playful would work for enterprise too. And in this situation, it didn't. So it's so fun for me to even be proven wrong in different ways.
Yeah. And I think it could also be because the audience is IT, and people in IT at enterprise companies have a little bit different of a vibe then they still wear real clothes to work. Whereas if you go in IT at a small company, typically they look like they just rolled out of bed. It's very different vibes. And so it may be different if your audience is different. If you're selling into marketers, I don't think, I haven't run that test, but my assumption would be you wouldn't see that stark difference.
Yeah. So interesting. Everything comes down to knowing your customers and the segments and what they want, who they are. Everything in marketing comes down to that, right? So we talked about a few things that are working and that you see on the email side. What do you see, and it could be email or outside of email for marketing in general, that you're just over, is not working, and you wish it would be dead and people would stop doing, other than the fax machine?
It is that shiny ball syndrome.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that it's like when something new comes out, and it's usually a new term. It's not even necessarily that it's a new thing. It's like all of a sudden, everyone wants to run in that direction. And I know I can be guilty of it too, because there's a little bit of the FOMO of I want to be doing whatever is the new hot thing. But it really creates this disjointed effort within marketing, and it creates an inability to actually measure. Because I don't mean the measure of like our actual charts and graphs, because that part's important. Sometimes I think that we overly lean into measuring. But in terms of overall effectiveness, things need time to really shake out and understand if they're actually working. And I can remember there was a company, talking about me getting bored, there was a company that I left because it was like, we could never prove or disprove that anything was working because we were constantly running in a different direction. And for me, I'm like, I'm not learning anything. I'm not growing because I don't know. I'm just doing a bunch of things. And I don't know if any of it works because it's like, we're going to run this way. And before you even get halfway through that race, it's okay, make a left. We're going to run this way. And I see that in so many different companies that they have a short-term mindset. Okay, leads are down. We got to do something. But they disrupt things that are more of a long-term play. And for marketing leaders, that is a hard balance of doing the long-term things, running the marathon, while also having some sprints that you've got in there to impact the immediate revenue. And that is really hard to do. And in trying to do that, the thing that I see so often is people chasing. How many companies switched to a PLG motion because PLG became the hot thing and they thought the product was great and okay, we can get rid of sales. And then it was like, oh crap, this didn't work. Now we got to hire them all back. And that's probably the most recent example where I saw a lot of companies run in that direction and then realize, whoopsie, that wasn't the way that we should go.
I wonder if AI SDRs is the next thing. Like everyone's jumping on that bandwagon. There's a lot of good ones out there, but
yeah, I do believe that is going to be one. I do think that there are a lot of companies who have been too quick to get rid of the human SDR without fully making sure that the technology works. And it's one of those things that by the time they see it, it's going to be a big revenue challenge. I think anytime you have a knee-jerk reaction and just move the whole business in a particular direction without vetting it a little bit, it is super risky. It could work out, but I do think that's going to be a place that we see a lot of companies go, that wasn't the best decision.
Yeah, agree. It's like you said, the shiny object syndrome. I'm very guilty myself. I get excited about any new tool and then I see if I have budget to try it out. But do you see a rise in this lately with the pressure of the doing more with less and smaller teams, bigger goals, to just be pivoting and constantly chasing like, oh, we need more leads, we need more pipeline, we need more MQLs, and just trying spaghetti at the wall style?
Yes. And I think there is a fine line between the spaghetti on the wall, see what sticks, and doing some testing to see what works. Like there's a real fine line there. And to me, the testing and trying and piloting is so important. Like we should be, okay, this new thing came out, let's pilot it. Let's see, is there a use case? But you do those things in a more controlled environment. I can remember, and this is pre-AI, but there was a company we worked with that in my last company that had a really unique sort of outbound meeting scheduling SDR kind of model. And these were women who were in a medium security prison. And I had heard really good things about this company, was having some challenges. I was in the marketing role. My team was having challenges getting sales to pay attention to our leads. I had the budget. So I was like, you know what? We're going to pilot this and we're going to let the Orange Blossoms, that was what the team was called, we're going to let them take a shot at it. Now, did I stop all my efforts and give everything to them? No, that would have been crazy. I have no idea if this is going to work. But what I did for a really big initiative, we split the leads. And sales wasn't following up on them anyway. So my risk was low. It was like, at least I know with them, they got to follow up because I'm paying them to. And so had to battle with the sales leader because people in prison, that it creates some feelings. And I got the buy-in to let me go with the pilot. And we only couldn't get the 50-50. We did, I think it was like 30% of the interest that we generated went to that team. The other 70% went to the sales team.
This is fascinating.
Because the sales leader was so adamant that I was wrong, he got his team to actually pay attention to the 70% we gave them. It was a win no matter what. Because they had
the real goal.
been ignoring everything, right? Which is what I wanted in the first place. But we gave it to the Orange Blossoms and they ran circles around our SDR
No way.
team.
Wow. Why do you think that is?
Not even close.
Wow.
And these weren't just generating meetings. Like their goal was get meetings scheduled. But when we looked at it further, and I took it as far as which ones got to the stage 2 opportunity, which is when we did a demo. Because I was like, I can influence the quality to at least get them to demo. So that was what we looked at, of the number of leads we sent, what marketing had qualified, to the number of meetings that were scheduled, to the number of those meetings that then turned into a demo. Ran circles around them. Like it was not even close. So much so that the sales leader came back to me and was like, I need to understand what they're doing.
Yeah,
and
I want to also.
A trip, because I had already been out there to the prison and met the women. He took him with me, went out there, and I don't even know if that company still exists. This was more than a decade ago, but it was one of those things that the pilot was worth it because we proved the model. And what we ended up doing was leveraging them for a really specific type of leads and refocusing the internal resources to a different type of lead where they were more effective. And so this is what I mean when I say run a test. We didn't wasn't like, oh, there's this new thing, fire this whole team. We're just, there's a lot of risk in that. But it was like, you know what, we're going to take this 30% and we're going to give it to them and we're going to see what happens. And it worked. And because it worked, then we still didn't just, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We still didn't just throw away the SDR team. We took a step back, and this was the sales leader, and looked at, where is my team really effective? And so then it was like, okay, we're just going to focus on this. And then I was happy as the marketer because now I know somebody's going to follow up with my leads because we're paying them to. And we worked with them for at least 3 years. I don't know if they continued to work with them after I left. For at least the 3 years we worked with them, it was extremely effective. And
this is amazing.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I say you try something. You got to be piloting. You got to be testing. all the shiny new things. Yes, you don't ignore it because that's how you become a blockbuster and you get antiquated and then you die off. We
Yeah.
do it in a controlled way so that we can figure out, does this thing work for us? Where that test or that pilot works, you then figure out how do we do more of it. Where it doesn't work, is that didn't work and we move on.
This is beautiful. I'm so curious. Did you find out any details what they were doing that was working with this particular audience? Was there any specific thing that they did differently, or is just enthusiasm and dedication?
So I think it was a bit of enthusiasm in the way that they were trained. So there was the enthusiasm because they had nothing better to do. It was like, this was the highlight of their day because it gave them a sense of normalcy and set them up for success once they were released.
Yes.
But in addition to that, the organization, the process they had us go through in ramping those people to be able to make the calls was really deep and really specific to the campaign. And so although they didn't know our product that way, like there were those off ramps of they just don't know that, they knew the persona, the messaging, the what were we trying to get them to do, what happens after. And so we gave them the what do they care about, like all the stuff that we do to put together the marketing program. They got trained on all of that along with what our SDR team would have been trained on. So to me, that more holistic view of this is end to end, where we could never get a sales team to get that deep into what marketing is doing. But to me, that end-to-end training allowed them to, even though they had scripts, it allowed them to pivot and flow with the conversation.
Yes. This is a great case study for why SDRs might, in some companies, be under marketing.
I am a fan of, or what they call, some people call the MDR, the marketing development rep.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've heard that at a few companies. To me, I won't say a blanket statement of where it should sit, but for a lot of organizations, there is a lot of value in having them sit under the marketing function.
Yeah. There's just so many golden nugget takeaways from that whole story, Brandi. That's beautiful. Before I let you go, because this has been amazing, I want to get a little bit inside Brandi a little bit more.
Okay.
One thing I've seen from all that you take on outside of your core job, that you are a big fan of community, right? You work with Pavilion, a few other organizations. Why is that? And what does community mean to you? Like, why is this such a staple for you?
This hasn't always been important for me. I can tell you, as a type A personality, someone who has always been a goal getter, high achiever, all these sorts of things, I can admit that when I was younger, I was a bit more self-centered and very driven about me, throw an elbow here and there, get out of my way. What I came to realize, and this epiphany happened at a funeral. I was at a funeral for a friend's grandmother who they lived in a rural town, and the grandmother was such a pillar in that community. Wow. And this little small town church was like standing room only. The mayor was there. The line of people to speak, I didn't think we were ever going to get out of that church. There were so many people, and all of them talked about, not about any of her accomplishments, which she had a lot, but they all talked about how she impacted their lives and how much she poured into, for her community was that small town, but how much of herself she put into that community completely selflessly, and how so much of her success was actually attributed to the selflessness of her giving back and that coming back around and benefiting her. And I sat there, and I really was there just in support of my friend. And I sat there really thinking, and I thought about my own funeral. And I was like, when I get there, this is what I want. I want a room full of people talking about how I impacted their life for the better, how much of myself I poured into things that mattered, And if they mention my accolades, that's great. But that's not, I don't want my funeral to have trophies above my casket, so to speak. I want to have lives that have been changed. And that changed so much in me in that moment. And I was a lot younger then. So it was that pivotal place where you start to really grow up. And so for me, community is not a location, but community for me is really those like me who have dedicated their careers to making a difference in their organizations and driving revenue, which doesn't sound as warm and fuzzy as building community centers, but it's the community that I care about. And so as a result of that, going through my career, especially as a woman, as a Black woman, there's so many things that I've overcome, things that I want to help the next generation not go through. I look for those places, one, that I can plug myself in, share my knowledge, share my connections, share my experiences, but then also be connected to people who want to do the same, because I don't know everything. And there's gaps in my experience, gaps in my career, things I've never done. So being around those other people, and I consider you one of those people, which is why I feel like I already know you so well. But being around those people, it means that I get poured into just as much as I'm pouring into others. And that comes around. And I've had people refer business to us because they're like, Brandi's amazing. She helped me in this completely unrelated way. And I know Tegrita does that. Not that they know Tegrita is also amazing, but they're like, someone with that heart and talent, like, you need to be connected to them. I had a guy come up to me at a conference and was like, are you hiring? I would love the opportunity to work for you, to learn under you, just based on what I know of you. And I had never talked to this guy before. Like, we weren't even connected on LinkedIn. So I'm like,
the reach.
Who are you? I didn't say that.
Yeah.
It was like in my head, I'm like, your name doesn't sound familiar. Your face doesn't. Have we met? And
you need a lead source.
And so that is why community is so important to me. And that's one of the reasons why I love Tegrita. The circle that goes around the Tegrita T represents community. It is the whole of the group that we want to put ourselves in the center of in order to have an impact, because business is business. You can say what you want about capitalism and all of that, but there are people making careers in this space, and that is very personal. And so where we're able to share our knowledge and things we've learned with that community, not only is it driving revenue for businesses, but it's shaping people, their careers, their own self-worth, all of those sorts of things. And so that's why it's so important for me.
Yes. So Brandi, first, you are the best storyteller I think I've ever heard. And that story, first the orange blossoms and now this story. But I don't know if you saw, I was tearing up when you were telling me this story, because I so feel that in my bones, that the need to, or the drive to make an impact. I think that's that's probably why I do women in B2B marketing. Like I have that desire to do that. Like, you gave me goosebumps telling me that story. It's so true. That's what we want to do. Yeah.
And it's one of those, each one, teach one, reach down, pull up the neck. There's all sorts of quotes related to that.
Yes. Okay, I could talk to you for hours. I want to hear more Brandi stories. We need to connect when I'm in Atlanta for sure.
Definitely.
One last question for you, if you have 2 extra minutes.
Yes.
If you could go back in time to little Brandi, always knew she wanted to go into marketing, but knowing everything that you know now and all of these wonderful stories you've gone through, what would you tell her?
I tell her, don't back down. Don't make yourself small. Don't minimize what you know or hold back on your opinion, because my career really blossomed and took off when I got to the point of not being afraid to ruffle feathers, not being afraid to show up as my whole authentic self.
Yes.
And that was where things started to change and I started to grow and all of those things. I can think back to so often I was the big personality, or she's too much, or she thinks she's better, or all these
Mm-hmm.
things. And so I shrunk myself and
Wow.
didn't take advantage of opportunities, didn't raise my hand in certain situations because it was like, oh, I felt being liked was more important. And I tell this to my kids now, or anybody who will listen, you
Yeah.
gotta always be who you are and don't let anyone else make your light shine, or don't ever turn down who you are to appease anyone.
Yes. I love that so much. You would be a great mentor. And I'm so glad you lead communities and have your own podcast. Everybody, first of all, if you're watching the video, because this will eventually get on YouTube and we'll share clips, she has her book behind her, CMO to CRO. So go check that out. But also her podcast. So it's Revenue Rehab, right, Brandi?
Yes, revenue rehab. It's like therapy, but for marketers.
Yes. So the intro, I watched your like a clip of your intro for the new season, and you were saying, and your, what do you call it? I'm blanking on what it was, but there's like a tagline that made me laugh out loud that I loved, because it was like the person who's leading, your recovery leader is Brandi. I was like, yes, recovery leader. That's genius.
Eating revenue is a tough gig. And we get beat up in some instances when numbers are down. So that's one of the reasons why we got to stick together and work through it.
Especially right now. Yes. Brandi, thank you so much. It has been enlightening and a pleasure to finally talk to you on the show with the mic on. Thank you for bestowing us with your presence.
You are welcome. Thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was. If anyone wants to reach out, get in touch, is LinkedIn the best place to find you?
Yes. I am always on LinkedIn. Let me know that you saw me here because, of course, like everyone, I've got a million LinkedIn requests.
Yes.
But yes, LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brandi. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Tag us. You like the episode, post it on LinkedIn, share with a friend, tag Brandi and myself in the show, and rate the show, review the show. It helps us get in front of more people like you. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.